over to see the stupid. And there we go. Recording in progress, we are told. Well, let me begin by slating this, which is the first thing I always do. Today is Earth Day, April 22nd of the year 2022. So there's a lot of twos involved in there. And I am Jim Freund. With me on Zoom, although we're aiming for audio, is Wendy N. Wagner, who is how many novels?
4 novels and a novella.
Very cool. No short stories.
Oh yeah, like
yeah, I thought there were short stories there, because I think that's where I first knew your name.
Oh.
Before I ever got involved in Lightspeed as the you see, when I say editor, as in I'm an editor, that means I cut sound.
Yeah.
I mix and I cut sound. And in my business, that's an editor. You're an editor. You cut and you mix and you choose stories.
Yeah. Same stuff, just a little bit different, textures and medium.
Yeah, exactly. So I call myself the post-production person, including for Nightmare Magazine, which you are now the editor of, and became editor how long ago?
It started last February, 2021. That was my first issue.
And before that, you were with Lightspeed.
Well, I've actually been working for Nightmare and Lightspeed for the same amount of time. I've been sort of John Joseph Adams' right-hand person at both magazines. So yeah, that started in 2014. So I've been doing it
for a
while, kind of overseeing how the submissions come in and keeping an eye on the staff and getting all the edits to all the writers. And a few years after I started, I kind of took over all the nonfiction at both magazines to kind of help out a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just kind of been snowballing until John put me in charge of Nightmare altogether.
And there was there's a very big change when you took over the. I'm now, as listeners know, I am not big on a lot of horror, but by that I usually mean body horror. I mean Sunny Moraine kind of body horror, and she is magnificent at it.
Yeah. Yes.
I have to hit myself every time I mispronoun them.
Yes, it's tough, but you get used to it, right?
And in the case of many people, yes. For some reason with them, I do not.
Huh.
And so the last time that she came and did a New York Review of Science Fiction reading in person, I handed her a rubber chicken. And she said, "What's that for?" It's for every time I mispronounce you.
Oh.
And of course, it was a very hot day, and they had made the mistake of dressing skimpily. This did not help my pronoun trouble.
Oh dear.
But she is a brilliant writer.
I love Sunny.
A wonderful person. And the horror that she writes, it can very often be like, people getting sliced up from the inside out.
Yep.
That's serious body horror, the gore. And I lived through the splatter era of the 80s. And I was the only one in my group at the radio station. We had our own screening room. Illicit, but but we had a big monitor and all kinds of playback equipment, and everybody but me loved the splatter movies.
Oh,
And I'd have to, rush out, with my hands over my eyes and stuff like that. But when you took over Nightmare, you haven't done as much in that manner. I mean, a lot of icky and a lot of, ooh, I want to, climb in under whatever shirt I'm wearing, because that is the purpose. But you've also published a fair amount of comedy.
yeah, one of the things I wanted to do was to showcase a really wide variety of horror, because I think, it's easy for anybody to say, I don't like horror. And then if you ask them a question, they're like, oh, well, I don't like this thing about horror, like you don't like the splatter stuff. Everybody's got the kind of horror that doesn't work well for them.
Yeah, that's me. I think it's not that I don't like horror, it's that I don't like some elements of it.
Right. And I think probably for everybody, there's some kind of horror that they could like. And I like to think that our goal at Nightmare is to publish such a wide variety of kinds of horror that maybe we'll publish the kind of horror that's right for somebody that didn't even know that they liked horror. It's horror for everybody is what I like to think of it as.
Yeah.
And I do love sometimes like super disgusting, gross out horror. And I'm looking for the day when a piece comes across my desk that is completely nasty and gooey and gross, but it works in a way that works for me. I haven't found that story yet, but I'm sure it's out there.
Yeah, you'll be doing it. You'll be there.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think. Well, what are the current horror awards? I can name, all the others, but
the Bram Stoker Awards are coming up
right.
just this May, actually. And I know they just started reading for the Shirley Jackson Awards, which is more kind of the weirder literary end of the horror spectrum.
Yeah.
And of course, World Fantasy also considers horror work.
Yeah, and Ellen Datlow has her hand in that, but not always, so that she can occasionally win.
Right, yeah.
As an editor. But yeah, I don't know why I blanked on those, because I have friends who have been involved in every one of those. So
well, there's a lot of awards to keep track of, and it kind of can turn into an award stew, I think.
Yeah. And they can be so politicized.
Yes.
So to the point where we can't have Gahan Wilson's ugly as sin portrait of H.P. Lovecraft as the fantasy award anymore. I don't know why they didn't use him for the horror award, because it is a grotesque
makes sense.
bust drawn by Gahan Wilson. It wasn't intended to be flattering.
But I do really like the look of the new award. It's so handsome.
I like it. 1 second, Set. Yeah, I have to apologize to everybody. There's construction going on next door. I live in an attached house, and I didn't want to postpone because they stopped jackhammering about 3 hours ago, but it sounds like they're starting again, but probably not for long. Probably
we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, in New York, we're approaching 5 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
And these people are going to be out at 5 no matter what. So I'm not that worried about it. But I do want to just apologize to listeners. Now, I had a great idea for a World Fantasy Award, and nobody listened. I thought they should have a dragon.
Right, dragons are so cool.
And each year feature a different culture.
Oh, that would be neat.
Almost every culture has a dragon.
Right, yeah.
And they're all different from each other. And there are good dragons, there are luck dragons, there are the smog, classic gold
Yep.
loving dragons. And the Chinese dragon is nothing like an Irish dragon.
Right. Yeah.
So I thought that a dragon would be the right thing, and they could have a different great artist design this year's dragon.
I really like that idea of being able to move through different artists, because that's one thing that I really like about the Hugo Award is that, they always have the rocket on top, but the base is designed by a different artist every year. So every year it's just a little bit different, and it puts a spotlight on different people working in the industry that I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's a neat thing. And the Nebula Awards are always a little bit different because
Right, yeah.
they're made out of sort of, well, plastic with glitter within, and the glitter is a nebula.
Yeah.
And each and every nebula is different from every other one,
which is pretty cool.
So if there are 5 in a year, all 5 are different.
Yeah. Neat.
And all that. So yeah, I thought that would be a fun thing. When did you begin writing?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer, like from about the age of, I guess, about 6 or 7. I knew I wanted to get into writing. And so I did a lot of writing as a kid. I took some creative writing classes as a young person and in college, but I didn't get really serious about writing until I was in my early to mid 20s, and I started writing while my daughter took naps. And so she would take her nap, and I worked on my first novel, which was a fantasy novel that has never been published. And I thought I really liked writing novels, but after I wrote a few of them and they didn't really go anywhere, I thought, well, I gotta get better faster. So maybe I'll start trying to write short stories. Even though I didn't really like short stories at the time. And so I went to the library.
And they're not that much easier to write than novels.
No, they're not. But this was what I thought as a neophyte. So then I went to the library and I was looking around and I saw this anthology of horror stories. And I remember that, like, the first horror thing I ever read was Stephen King's short story collection Skeleton Crew has the short story The Raft in it, and I read that when I was like 8, and I loved it. I just thought it was so brilliant and wonderful, and I was like, oh yeah, I used to really like short horror stories. And I knew I liked horror movies and stuff, but I hadn't really been reading any horror novels. So I tore through that anthology and I just started writing horror short stories, and I wrote lots and lots of them. And I finally got one published and kind of branched out into science fiction and fantasy. And that's really how I got my start, was just writing short stories, mostly dark ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really grateful that I found that book at the library. I think the next anthology that I found at the library that I loved was The Living Dead, which was edited by John Joseph Adams, who runs Lightspeed and Nightmare and has been my mentor through this whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So that was also a stroke of luck.
Yeah, he hasn't been on my show in 2 weeks, but yeah, he has a new book out,
Yeah.
And very the Lost Continents, which is a fun thing. I had Elsbreg de Camp on years ago, who did a Lost Continents book. He did a collection of fiction stories and then the history. He did a hardcover history of, from the island of Mu to whatever, published as nonfiction. And but it was a history of fiction. So
yeah,
nonetheless, and I got very much got into those kinds of things at that time. And he was a dark fantasy writer.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
I think today he would probably, some of his stuff would probably be considered horror.
I think so. There's kind of a fluctuating boundary between dark fantasy and horror. I kind of feel like the 80s really had a wonderful, wonderful time for late 80s, early 90s. So many wonderful dark fantasists were working, like Tanith Lee. And I feel like that was a time when that was a more common label that you saw in books, was dark fantasy. And now I think they often get lumped into horror.
Yeah, they do. Largely because it's the section that people visit in bookstores.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's all about
that's
the
what
marketing, right?
it always is. I mean, what's the difference between science fiction and fantasy? And the answer is the shelf.
Right? Yes. Ah,
And I use what is typically known as the Damon Knight definition of science fiction, which is science fiction is what I'm pointing at.
uh, leave it to Damon Knight.
Yeah, and therefore, everything qualifies. Thomas Pynchon. If when the sun goes nova by page 5 in one of Pynchon's novels, tell me that's not science fiction, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and then you get into the more pedantic. There's no question that horror and dark fantasy are subsets of fantasy.
Right.
But there are those people who would argue so is science fiction.
I'm kind of one of those people.
Yeah, I don't use the word that way, but I would totally agree with it.
Yeah. I think there is definitely a whole lot of horror that doesn't necessarily fall into the fantastical realm. Like a lot of things that are more thrillers about like serial killers and things like that. They don't really overlap as much with speculative stuff, but I'm not necessarily as interested in that. I mean, I would include that in Nightmare's repertoire, but I'm definitely more interested in weirder and farther out and more supernatural and strange things.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. The merely thriller doesn't do it for me. When I want suspense and thrills, I will go to John le Carre.
Yeah. Give yourself a good spy novel.
Yeah, and those can be pretty, edge of the seat kind of stuff, especially the Smiley books.
Ooh, I've never read any of those stuff, but my mom and my
Ooh.
sisters are huge fans.
Yeah, I highly recommend the 6-hour version of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy starring Alec Guinness.
Okay. That would be great. I love Alec Guinness, so.
Well, there's 6 hours of Alec Guinness, scripted by and based on the novel by John le Carre,
Oh, cool.
BBC. And after that, he can be awfully depressing, start the Spy Who Came In From the Cold. It's like when you're done with that, you just want to cry.
Oh, I need a nice Stephen King novel to give me a pick-me-up after that.
Yes, exactly. But le Carre was no fan of world politics. Yeah. He turned down a knighthood. He referred to the first George Bush's becoming president as a coup, as a junta. Wow. His own language he used. And he worked for MI6. Wow. Where Ian Fleming was sort of a let's push some papers along, or just sit somewhere and share some information. Le Carre was a spy.
Wow, he really knew what he was talking about.
He really did, and thoroughly realistic and good suspense.
Wow. well, maybe I'll put that in my summer reading list.
Yeah, I would. Well, yeah, but if you ever have the watching time, it's difficult with all the quality television that we're enjoying right now, or movies on television,
Yeah.
largely thanks to the pandemic. Um, as I say, the BBC version of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which you can probably stream in a number of places.
Probably. If nothing else, I can probably get it from the library.
You probably could. You probably could. I mean, starring Alec Guinness, it's not new.
Right.
It's mid-70s.
Yeah. They have a lot of classics.
Pre-Obi-Wan. And they actually did two of the Smiley novels. There are three main Smiley novels, and then he appears in cameos.
Cool.
He's in The Spy Who Came In From the Cold and stuff like that.
All right. Wow.
So maybe you'll find a good. Actually, there have been good nightmarish spy stories written.
I believe that.
Yeah, you may come across one.
Yeah.
So, with how much time does it take you now out of your month, because you're working on a monthly cycle with Nightmare Magazine? What kind of an effort is it? How much do you have to read? And do you have a slush pile reader?
It's tough to say. So we open twice a year to submissions, and I just don't read as quickly as JJA used to.
Oh, God. He was known for sending out rejection letters for things that hadn't been submitted yet. Or buying things that hadn't been. That's when he was at FNSF.
Right, yeah. I had to put like a little update on like our submission guidelines that says expect a response within 3 months, because it just takes a long time to go through the pile. Yeah. And of course, some things are easier to get through than others. Sometimes there are stories that you can look at and without reading too much of it that it's not going to work out for you. But some you have to read a lot more carefully. But it's tough too, because there's a lot of overlap between the two magazines, since I do work for them both. So, and I'm not reading slush at Lightspeed right now. Right now, John is reading all of his own slush. So
and now there's also Fantasy Magazine.
Right. And they're
Risen from the Dead.
Yes. I was actually the assistant editor at Fantasy the last year that it was open, before it took the deep sleep.
Under Doug Cohen.
Yeah. So no, not under Doug Cohen, because it was Doug Cohen he was at Realms of Fantasy.
I thought it was Fantasy.
No.
Okay, fine.
Sean Wallace and Molly Tanzer were doing, and not Molly Tanzer, Sean Wallace and Kat Rambo were doing Fantasy. And then Sean had John Joseph Adams do it for 1 year, and then it went to sleep.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got confused.
So many magazines to keep track of.
Yeah, they were just, it was whoever was in the pub at ReaderCon at the time.
Right.
Might have been.
I just had to think back about who I got rejections from. That's all.
There you go. Grudges.
So
Octavia Butler had a wall plastered with her rejection letters.
Oh, wow. I just have a big email inbox.
Yeah. She started earlier.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I work all afternoon usually on Lightspeed and Nightmare stuff, talking to the writers and working on edits and reading submissions and things like that. But sometimes the email gets too much for one day and I have to read submissions at night. But I try to leave nighttime to have normal life activities.
as opposed to nightmarish ones.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there any point at which you are just overwhelmed with all of this darkness and just need to see something or read something silly or just pure pleasure?
I gotta say, I'm always reading something that's not work. Because I there for a while I couldn't really read any science fiction or fantasy after working at Lightspeed and Nightmare for so long. It just wasn't fun for me. So I took a real hiatus on reading very much of it. You know, I think about the only series I really kept up with in science fiction over the last several years was the Expanse series, which I still haven't read the last one. And I feel like I'm kind of getting a little more back into it. I'm like, I finally picked up Jade City by Fonda Lee and I'm reading it and it's so good. But in general, I can still read horror for fun. So I read a lot of horror novels because it's still fun. And then, but I also read just a ton of nonfiction. That is my play literature.
Yeah, every so often, I just need some really good nonfiction.
Yeah.
And I've discovered the joy of why my Jill Lapore is one of my favorite writers. Check her out, Lepore.
I'm writing it
She writes for the New Yorker, and the New York Times. She teaches at Harvard.
down. Wow.
You know, one of those underachievers.
Yeah.
Very prolific. A very recent article, very political too. Very recent article was about the current banning of books and supposed parental control of books as an excuse. And she does it through the eyes of the Scopes trial.
Oh, wow.
Of the history of the Scopes trial. And she looks at the history of the Scopes trial through his wife and sister.
Okay, this sounds like a riveting read.
Everything, her boring stuff is riveting.
Oh, that's cool.
And her stuff is not boring. So yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So there's somebody I can totally get lost in.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily always a giggle, but she's a very clever writer.
That's neat. Oh, I look forward to checking it out.
Yeah, so that makes up some of my I can't read anything else.
Yeah.
And did you have a pandemic read? Did you have a favorite series that you went through and reread? And like, you know, umpteen books in a row.
I did not, but I read a lot of books about the environment while I was in pandemic. One book
Today
that
being
I read,
Earth Day, that's good.
Yeah, it's really appropriate. So I kind of went into pandemic at a little bit of a disadvantage over a lot of other people. At the very end of 2019, I was hit by a car and I broke my ankle in a couple of places and my foot. And so like I spent the first part of 2020 in a cast and not really leaving the house at all and stuff like that. And so I'd only been back in the world for, you know, a week or two, finally
before
getting
the world
out,
shut down.
and then the world shut down. And it felt really miserable. And one book that I read that just seemed really appropriate for the time, I can't think of the writer's name, but it's called The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating. And story of a woman, she had been traveling in Europe or something like that, and she was struck by a mysterious virus or something. No one even knows what made her sick, really. But she had, in a lot of ways, her symptoms are what people have now when they have long COVID. Yeah. She was so sick, she had to be in bed and not move at all for months and months and months. And the book was about her recovery from this ailment when she was just stuck at home, laying in bed all by herself almost all of the time, and could barely read a few pages a day. And a friend brought her a plant, and on the plant, kind of by accident, was a snail. And the snail reminded this woman of her own self, and she wound up keeping it in a terrarium and sort of
Oh,
studying this snail, and it was her companion while she was ill. And she could even, in the very quiet peacefulness of her house all by herself with nothing, she couldn't listen to TV, she couldn't listen to the radio. She could hear the snail chewing, and it
oh
was such
my
a
God.
fascinating experience. So that
Well,
for me was like the perfect pandemic read, because it just felt, at the beginning of pandemic, it just felt like we were all in our own little terrariums and kind of cut off from the world in a weird way. And that book was a wonderful, inspiring story to read. But I also just read so many, like, just really great books about nature and the environment. And
mhm.
another great book, I live in the Pacific Northwest, and a book that came out that year that I picked up, it was called After the Blast by Eric Wagner, which was about how they studied, like, what happened after Mount St. Helens blew up. So it's all
Oh
about the
my.
tremendous amount of ecological information they got from watching what happened up there, and making theories about what would happen, making hypotheses, and finding things went or didn't go as planned. And it was an
And
absolute
let's not discuss Yellowstone.
Lord.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, so that was a real highlight of the year for me, was reading this book. And then last year I went hiking up on Mount St. Helens, and I was thinking about that book quite a lot.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, there are still places that you're walking and it feels like you're, I don't know, on the moon or something.
hmm I again, I would think so. I
Yeah.
watch as there have been volcanoes over the last couple of
Oh,
years. There are where there's a volcano, there's a webcam.
cool. That
And
was
so I usually keep active volcanoes on my TV, using either my Roku
yeah.
and going to YouTube and just putting it there. Right now, I'm birding. Where am I birding? Ithaca, New York,
Oh,
Cornell University at the Lab of Ornithology. They have there are a few hundred birder websites,
that would be fun.
and many of them have great sunsets, by the way,
Oh, wow.
especially the Mississippi Flyway one. But there are also a number of volcano uh, uh, live streams. If it's not live, I don't watch it. There's
Neat.
lots of archives up there, but I just
Yeah.
love the idea of that. There was this volcano that lasted about 4 months in Iceland,
Oh, great.
and there were 3 different webcams for it.
Whoa, cool.
And when you got some idiot tourist like standing in front of the webcam waving hi, I just switched to another one.
Tourist. Sheesh.
Yeah,
Oh,
well, I mean, these were dumb tourists. They were walking up to the edge of the volcano,
oh my goodness.
active volcano, spewing lava.
What are people thinking?
And there's archived at least a couple of things of somebody who's like walking up, seeing how close they can get, and all of a sudden a lava spew comes right at them, and they have to run out of the way, and they get away safely and stare at it screaming, and I laugh because, like, how stupid.
Right? There are some things you just don't get close to, and volcanoes, lava is one of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Iceland wasn't telling people too much to stay away because it was the only income they were getting was volcano tourism.
Wow. Now, you mentioned birding when we were just chatting. Are you a birder?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Although I haven't gone out. My partner Barbara and I are thinking this Sunday, finally, the weather is supposed to be like 65 to 70 degrees and
Nice.
clear. So
Nice.
we live on the coast opposite you, and we are on the flyway by the Jamaica Bay area. And if you get there during migration, which has just ended, of course, but then you can get the warblers and all kinds of raptors and stuff like that.
That's great.
And there are some wonderful federally managed areas. Even though this is Brooklyn, right in Brooklyn,
Wow.
and in Staten Island, which is I'm 4 blocks from the overly priced bridge that goes to Staten Island. So you can find some actual preserved marshes
Cool.
that you can walk around.
That's
So,
cool.
and when you can't do that, as I say, there are, if people start by going to YouTube and just look up, say, Cornell
Yes.
or explore.org,
Huh.
they both, and Explore also, of course, brings the annual salmon catch
Oh, nice.
up in the Katmai area of Alaska,
Yeah.
where the salmon are jumping up this waterfall,
Neat.
and all the bears are there to catch them.
Yep.
So from about June through October, you're just watching the salmon jumping and the bears catching,
Wow.
and then they give the Fat Bear Award.
Oh, yes, I've seen the fat bear like voting on Twitter.
Yes, absolutely. And my favorite, Otis, won this year.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
That's
Yeah.
about his 5th time winning. He's old. He's about 18,
Wow.
which, for a bear living in the wild.
That's quite a long time.
Yeah, they are. So webcams are my outdoors when I can't actually go birding.
Yeah. It's good that they exist.
So I'm not a birder in the sense that I keep a life list, although Barbara does have her life list.
Okay. Wow.
And actually, I'm a birder because she's a birder.
Okay. She rubbed off on you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so, you can go out, and even when you don't see anything, you've just been out in the woods.
Yep. It's pretty terrific.
And we choose our days well. We get, clean air and a quiet walk.
Yeah.
Where when you come across other people, they're doing the same thing you are.
Yes. It's terrific.
They're with the exception of, you go to certain trails. There's one in New Jersey where you have to be careful, because while I'm looking up for birds, I trip over mycologists looking at mushrooms.
There should be a sign, beware of mycologists.
Oh, absolutely. They're down on all fours, paying
wow.
attention to nothing around them.
Yep. That's so great. Oh.
And that's a wonderful thing. Just the idea of, how did your birding go? Well, I tripped over a mycologist.
Sounds like a New Yorker cartoon.
It does. And it is, because it's within, not spitting distance, but you're right on the other side of the Hudson.
Yeah.
And you are on the top of the Palisades, and you can look over the Palisades and have the most spectacular views of Manhattan. And from Manhattan, the most spectacular view of the Palisades, which is a beautiful natural area.
Yeah, I've seen photos and I just can never believe that it's right there by the city. It's amazing.
Yeah, just right across the Hudson.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's another thing. You can go on a boating tour. I'll go to Lower Manhattan, get on a boat. We'll go around to various islands filled with nothing but herons' nests.
Cool. I love herons.
Yeah, they are great. And there's also a tour, one that currently has Barbara obsessed with her writing, and this I know would obsess you as well. Now I'm forgetting, I'm forgetting the name of the island, but what it is New York's Potter's Field.
Oh, neato.
Yeah, because I know you have a thing for cemeteries.
Yes, very much.
And these are mostly unmarked. They are worked on. It is maintained by prisoners.
Okay.
And a lot of prisoners are also buried there, and a lot of them anonymously.
Wow.
And since the pandemic, nobody has been able to go out to try to identify their relatives.
Oh,
See if they could find, is my great aunt buried here?
Yeah.
Or something like that. That's the nature of a potter's field.
Right.
So that's a really good setting for dark fiction.
It really is. Yes.
And I won't say more about that because I know at least one work that won't be done for quite a while that will be coming your way.
Oh, good. I will keep my fingers crossed that it doesn't take too long.
So, and those are also great places to go birding.
Yes, cemeteries are wonderful places to check out, nature stuff. I really like walking in cemeteries. I've seen bald eagles in some of ours, and salamanders, and just deer, you name it. They're great places.
Yeah, about a 90-minute drive away going toward the Delaware River. I went with a bunch of people from a tech magazine I was working for as an editor. And most of the people were there to hike, and just, climb up that 45-degree angle as fast as you can. Barbara and I were just head in the air looking for whatever. And I had never seen too many raptors in my life. But all of a sudden, this bald eagle just decided to come into view and do a perfect U circling us.
Oh, that's great.
Like a horseshoe. And I think everything slowed down. It was like slow motion.
Yeah.
That was my first bald eagle. And the other thing is that a neighbor of mine put up this wonderful feeder and attracted maybe 70 or so sparrows.
Oh, cute. That's great.
It was cute until the kestrels came along to eat the sparrows.
Well, then it was very nature, right?
Yes, it was very nature. And in fact, one friend of mine who's a bit of an ornithologist came by and he saw this and he said, "Oh, a kestrel feeder." Without knowing that, he was absolutely correct.
Yes, he was. Well, the circle of life. Our backyard, we're part of a program that our local Audubon organizes, where they certify certain yards as like wildlife habitat. So we signed up for that program, and you have to agree to keep your cats inside and follow certain gardening practices and plant a lot of native plants. And we slowly, when we first moved into our house, our backyard was just grass and some not very happy rose bushes, and now it's full of trees and bushes and things. And we've got, when we first moved in, the bird feeder was kind of in the back corner, not the bird feeder, the bird bath. It was kind of in the back corner, and it looked lovely underneath this big rose bush. But little by little, we've been moving the bird bath closer and closer so you can see it from the kitchen window more easily. Now it's like in the perfect viewing zone, and we just get so many birds hanging out there, taking their baths and enjoying the things we've planted. And it's just so nice to see what a difference it's made, like changing our whole yard from just grass to having all these plants for the birds. And it makes me really, really happy. But we have a couple of times seen a sharp-shinned hawk in our yard.
Oh, yeah.
One time my dog was very happy to find the leavings that the sharp-shinned hawk left. A hawk, when it catches like a squirrel or something, it can just kind of like peel it like a banana, then it just leaves that and the extra crunchy bits wherever. It just like flings it aside, just like a kid with like the apple core or whatever. Boy, the dog was happy to find that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And, leave it for, if your area has vultures,
Yes.
they'll finish it off.
We're really lucky because we don't live that far from the Willamette River, and there are a couple of protected like nature areas not that far from us. So we have quite a lot of nature activity. You can run into a coyote if you're out for a walk, or sometimes the bald eagles fly right down our street. We have hawks and vultures, and sometimes you hear owls, and it's such.
Oh, that's neat.
Really, really, I love it. So
yeah, we don't get that in Brooklyn. That's why I need the websites.
Yes. Yeah.
The websites are very important to me. So. And my favorite one, I haven't even mentioned, Wild Earth.
Wild Earth.
Okay. Wild Earth. They have every single day of the week, and this is totally free. They have safaris.
Oh, wow.
They have one 3-hour safari and one 4-hour, a morning and an evening. And I can tell you the New York, it changes year round because their sunrises and sunsets change. Sure. And we go to daylight savings time. They do not.
Aha.
So the times change.
Sure.
But if you look for either Wild Earth, they were on YouTube and now they have their own channel.
Oh, okay, cool.
But they have the first hour of every safari is still on YouTube.
Oh,
and then they tell you to join their channel, which is free, but their channel is commercials.
Okay.
Which annoys me.
That'd be fun.
It's still incredible fun because they're in Kruger National Park, southeastern Africa, in right. South Africa.
Yeah.
And it's just leopards and the better guides know their birds, and they pay as much attention looking up. And at this time of year, their idea of an Easter egg hunt is to put cameras on selfie sticks and
fun.
look into nests.
Oh, that's terrific.
It really is. It really is. And cuckoos.
Oh, wow.
They get a lot of cuckoos. And if you're really lucky, you can catch a cuckoo when the parents are away laying an egg in somebody else's nest.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's what they do.
Right. That's why the book is The Midwich Cuckoos.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Which for some reason, I think is getting looked at again. There's something.
I think I heard something about that too.
Yeah. In the last week, I heard some filmmaker who I respect looking at Midwich Cuckoos for a modern update version, which I think would be the third version.
I've only seen Village of the Damned.
Yeah, that's the second version.
Yeah.
I think the first one was so bad it never really made it out of its neighborhood in England.
Oh, good.
They're both British films.
Yes. Well, I'm interested to see how that goes, because that book is creepy. It's really
It is
creepy.
And I guess today we would call it horror, wouldn't we?
I think yes.
Yeah, but I read it as science fiction or fantastic fiction. Yeah. But the as we were saying, these are very, and getting back on subject, these were very movable lines.
Exactly. Yes. It's totally subjective.
What books or stories would you like to see dramatized? And I say dramatized so that we include theater and radio and whatever kind of performance art, and movies are obviously, or now streaming series,
Right.
can do novels, which they have been doing.
Right. Yeah. Oh gosh. I also think like video games, they are also like dramatized art, but like an interactive dramatized art. Like,
Yeah, I'm very much into interactive fiction.
yeah,
Not, I don't quite understand, but there's one thing I do get, which is in interviewing people through the years, it's like, what got you into science fiction, fantasy, whatever? And the answer would, in the case of Octavia Butler, it was a really, really bad science fiction movie where she said, I can do that and I can make the people look like me.
cool.
So it was a movie that got her going. And for some people, it was Twilight Zone, or it was a particular book. But only to find out that some of our more modern writers, like, for example, Nora Jemisin, N.K. Jemisin,
Mhm.
for those people that don't live 4 miles from her, she got in through video games,
Yeah. Yeah.
and some people through D&D.
Yep.
So I'd be very curious at some point to find out what spun some people off, and is there anything in common with
Right.
their fiction than with people whose launch point.
Yeah. That would be an interesting thing to look into.
It will be my dissertation.
That sounds good. You need something else to do with yourself.
Yeah.
Writing a dissertation seems perfect.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh,
But I had asked you a question, and of course I interrupted you.
well, when it comes to video game adaptations, novel to video game adaptations, I think a great book that would make a wonderful video game is Caitlin Starling's The Luminous Dead, which is a science fiction horror novel that came out in, I want to say 2017, 2018. I mean, it's about a gal who is fitted in like an exosuit kind of mecha setup to go explore this deep cave to map it for mining on another planet. And the last crew that went down there is believed to have died. And it's all about cave exploration, and it's really creepy. And there's a lot of the only
On the Vandermeer scale, where would you put it? To explain to the audience, the Vandermeer scale is
far out as Vandermeer, like it's more grounded and feels like real life, and not quite like you're hallucinating, but it's getting there. So like on a scale of 0 to 10 on the Vandermeers, I'd say it's at least a 6. So
okay.
yeah.
For those who don't know, Jeff Vandermeer, who edits a great deal with his wife, Anne Vandermeer, but Jeff wrote, the Southern something.
The Southern Reach series.
Thank you. The Southern Reach series, the first novel of which was Annihilation and was made into a movie by the same name, a movie that somewhat resembles the film Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky.
Okay, I can see that. I mean, I've never seen Stalker, but Andrei Tarkovsky seems like I can see, like, just from like film discussion, that could have probably been a big influence on BN Wiley.
Tarkovsky is a genius. He ranks a 9.5 on the Kubrick scale.
Nice.
With Kubrick being the 10, of course.
Yeah.
Tarkovsky is up there. I recommend Solaris.
Yes. Yeah. My husband's a huge fan of that film. So
yeah, it's
been on my to-watch list for a while.
Yeah. And it's a short for Tarkovsky. It's a Russian, 3.5-hour film, where Stalker is about 4 hours.
Okay, good to know.
But the thing is, if you see it properly, if you can't see it in the theater, darken your lights, limit your breaks.
Right.
Have the num-nums handy. You will not feel the time go by.
Yeah, that's always a treat when you can get a film that's that long that just you can be completely immersed in it for its running length, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and he has done that. So that's a book into video game.
Yeah.
What other adaptations
Oh man,
would you
I
dream of?
think, well, I'm sure that we don't have long to wait. I'm sure it's already been optioned. I think that My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones, his latest like slasher movie inspired novel, will make a great movie.
Mhm.
Um, Although I think it might lose some of the meta, but who knows? The right person could do it wonders. And then, I just started reading Jade City by Fonda Lee, which I feel really guilty that I didn't start reading this series earlier because Fonda's actually a friend of mine, and I heard the first
Oh
chapter
dear.
at a convention, like before it was, I think, even finished or something. And I knew from the minute I heard it was going to be a great book. It would be the best TV show ever. Like so good. So good.
Okay.
Those are some adaptations I would like to see a lot.
Yeah.
But I am really excited about an adaptation I've heard is coming out. I think it's with HBO, but I might be wrong. But Raymond Feist and Jenny Wirt's novels are finally getting turned into a TV show.
Those are just about overdue. I don't know who's doing it, but I think of Amazon only because they like the Prime Video likes to do these endless things, and what they usually do, and this would certainly work with the Ray Feist stuff and his various collaborators, primarily Jenny Wirtz.
Yeah.
They take the world building, and they throw away the story.
Yeah.
And they write their they keep a few of the characters, and so they take the world that these writers have created, and then they write their own story, hopefully with talented people doing it.
And that seems like a great fit for like those books. I haven't read
Yeah.
them in a long time, but I loved that world when I was a young person. So I think I'd love to see stories set in it.
Yeah. I think that would be a perfect candidate.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard that rumor, but I'm looking forward to it. Don't know about, the umpteen versions of Lord of the Rings, and I could care less about Game of Thrones. Sorry, George. And I like George Martin's other books better.
Tough Voyaging was actually the first
Yes,
novel I ever read. Isn't
it was so much fun.
it great?
It's sort of his Star Trek like.
Yeah, really enchanting story. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it really is. And now people will probably pick up on it just because he's become such a behemoth.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. I remember because I've been recommended Game of Thrones, the series, so many times, and I've started reading it, never gotten into it. And I remember when I was like trying to figure out what was that great book I read when I was a kid, and when I realized it was George R.R. Martin, who I was like, I'm not really that into his stuff. I was like, wow, I can't believe it.
He's a wonderful writer.
Yeah.
He's written great short stories.
Yeah. JJA has reprinted some really great stories by him in different anthologies that I've loved.
Yeah, and I have not seen him in 25 years. He used to live in this neck of the woods.
Yeah.
And but I've always gotten the feeling that he's a little tired of Game of Thrones. Not with the ranch that he's bought with it or the movie studio that he's built with it.
Yeah.
Or anything. He has his own movie studio.
Right. Yeah.
And they're doing umpteen prequels and spin-offs and stuff like that now. And he's involved with those somehow. But his latest thing is a video game.
Cool.
The Elden Ring.
Oh, that's right. I forgot he was involved with that.
Yes.
People seem to be loving that game too.
Yeah. So
Good for him.
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Deserves
Absolutely.
to explore all the things that make his creative heart go pitty pat.
Yeah. And he's a fanboy,
Yeah.
which helps a lot. You know, he just loves to talk about the writing of it and all that. So, and other people's writing.
That's cool.
So, we should probably start wrapping because when my Hour of the Wolf is currently only an hour, which to you it's like, well, of course. But there was a time when it was a daily 2-hour show.
Wow.
For quite a few years. There was a point when it was 2 5-hour shows.
Wolves had bigger clocks back then, I guess.
Well, you could play a lot more music. If I'd walk in there and didn't have a damn thing to say, time to listen to some Mahler.
Ah, nice.
Or some Frank Zappa.
Excellent.
You know, whatever you're in the mood for. So, what would you consider for people who like me would say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't like horror. What are some good gateway books or movies?
Gateway things to enjoy for the horror non-lovers. Gosh, I think, well, I'm going to lean on Caitlin Starling again. She has a new book called The Death of Jane Lawrence, which is a book that sort of straddles the fantasy horror line a little bit. It's a little bit gothic, but it also has some, mysterious, almost Lovecraftian elements to it. And I think that book would be a great book for anybody who reads speculative fiction but says, oh, I don't really like horror. Like, I feel like that would be a good book to bring them into. And another book, I mean, this is terrible to say. I feel guilty saying this, but a lot of people have told me that my book that came out last summer, The Deer Kings, like they said, I don't like horror, but I liked this. So that could maybe be a good match for people. It's about like,
I have to read that.
It's got like 2 different timelines. It's got stories that like part of the story is told from the point of view of a bunch of kids growing up on the Oregon coast. And they're really like, all of them are kind of underprivileged and have real struggles. And they're being bullied by their one kid's neighbor who's a drug dealer. And so they create this supernatural protector to help them. And then the second timeline is that it's set like in our time when these people are grown-ups and they all are drawn back to town only to discover that the creature they created has now like become like it's been co-opted by the local booster club who've created a cult around it and the local football team. So it's got a few scary moments, but it's also really about like making family, like how friends can become so close that they're family members. And it's about like doing the right thing. And it has a lot of talk about donuts. So, if you like donuts, it's a good book for that.
Wow. Okay. And now have you, that sounds like something, by the way, that could be sold to media.
I wouldn't mind if it was a TV show or a movie. I think that'd be fun.
Okay. Does your agent handle media?
I am currently between agents. I had an agent when I was writing science fiction, and he didn't really want me to write horror, so we broke up. So I'm still looking for somebody to take care of me.
It's all speculative fiction, gang.
Yes.
It's even though it has not been my number one thing, I've always made sure that it's been represented on Hour of the Wolf.
That's good.
Yeah, because I know that my listeners, if they're reading science fiction and the like, will also enjoy horror. They're very much the same audience. My personal taste as a broadcaster, I and have a larger responsibility, as do publishers.
Yeah.
So those are some good recommendations.
Thank you.
Well, okay, so we need to do this again, and we need to also get you to read.
Oh, that would be really fun. I love doing readings.
Do you now? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we may have to talk about something else that I do soon. But
Ooh.
and I'll talk to you about that off the air.
Sounds
So
good.
again, Wendy N. Wagner
That's
is
right.
the guest. Your current books in print are
The Deer Kings, which is a horror novel, and The Secret Skin, which is a gothic novella that just made the Locust recommended reading list.
wow. Okay, that's right. That's right. I saw that. Congratulations. And of course, every month, Nightmare Magazine.
That's right.
And
I look forward to every month.
yeah, and one can listen to the podcasts.
It's terrific.
Yeah. Skyboat Media does some really great stuff. And I've been grooming Terrence Taylor, who's now done 2 episodes as host. And I think he's getting there.
Oh, good. I can't wait. Can't wait to hear that. I haven't listened to the most recent.
Ooh.
I heard his first one.
Okay. Well, I think the most recent one was pretty good. And the story was wonderful.
Yay,
No, I don't remember which story it was.
The Scottish
Sorry.
murder.
Yes, that of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a murder ballad.
Yes, fun.
Yes. And okay, sorry. Quick story about this. We did a New York Review of Science Fiction reading event with E. Lily Yu and Amal Motar, El Motar. So yeah, 2 of the greats.
Yeah.
And when I met them both in different times, and in each time it was about murder ballads.
Whoa.
Child ballads or murder ballads.
Funny. Oh, wow.
What a coincidence. So there you go. I'm a big fan of the child ballads.
They're wonderful.
They really are. Okay, well, again, Wendy Wagner, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Okay, and we will now stop the recording.